Bachelor Nation is on fire again. That's like, what, the 20th time this year? And with Grocery Store Joe taking his Survivor look a little too literally and voting Chris Conran off to Exile Island, everyone is wondering why Brendan and Pieper didn't get the same treatment. Well, fear not, a new preview is here and it's looking like these two are about to get their turn. So let's take a look and see what we can figure out, including eliminations for the next rose ceremony and new arrivals. And please, no posting any blatant spoilers in the comment section below unless they've been sleuthed out, and I'll leave a link to the full, uninterrupted preview in the description.
My Paradise experience has been based on lies.
If you're already in a relationship, that defeats the purpose of coming here.
They are the villains of their own story.
So yup, Brendan and Pieper are going to be getting the focus now, and even Titus is like, dudes, what the hell? Now, when it comes to Natasha, you may be worried about where she could possibly be getting a rose from next episode, and why she's crying in this shot, but don't. Cause one, at this point, she's already got more followers than Brendan had before last episode, and currently has more than both Brendan and Pieper combined, so that's a pretty huge W for her. And two, there's a happy ending for her at the next rose ceremony. Take note of this crying shot for now, and let's continue on.
I know you guys wrote the rule book of relationships.
Stop. Things are getting more serious around Paradise.
The best chocolate sundae I ever had.
Okay. Maybe we should all move into the other room while Riley and Marissa have dessert. Riley might not have gotten a piece of that chocolate cake that Mari threw in the fire, but I bet he's not thinking about that now. But apart from all the making out going on in this section, the primary focus is the blowout on its way between Brendan and Pieper and, well, everyone else. And I'm not surprised that Demi is going to be taking over the role of lead prosecutor for this argument, at least in this moment, considering she was already angry over how Brendan dumped her at the end of their one-on-one date back in episode 2. By the way, this all takes place the night of the next rose ceremony. Apart from these two being in these same outfits in this shot, which looks like the moment they all gather around the host before people start mingling the night of the rose ceremony, there's further proof later. Now, why is this even important? Well, it pins down not just what these two are wearing the night of the rose ceremony, but what others are wearing as well. And that will help us consolidate our list of potential eliminations for next episode, as we have two shots from the previews of after the rose ceremony. But we'll get to that later, so let's keep moving.
Tonight is the most amount of people that are at risk of going home.
I'm ready to go home. I want to stay here. I haven't given up yet.
A sense of panic is kind of slowly setting in.
Okay, so as Demi is saying, this week is going to have the most eliminations. In part due to Chris Conran leaving with his rose, and there only being 9 men left and 9 roses to hand out. Also of note, Demi's talking about the rose ceremony while wearing this, and she's next to Marissa, who we know is in her rose ceremony dress, as we can match her in this outfit right here to this shot that I've talked about a lot in the preview breakdowns before. This is the end of the upcoming rose ceremony, which also means we know that Deandra and Jasenia are in the rose ceremony outfits right here. This is something I'll double back to later in a shot with Tammy. But also as we go through, you can note that these two, or any sign of someone in similar outfits, are absent from any of the post-rose ceremony shots, meaning likely Deandra and Jasenia are 2 of the women going home. Now, 2 other things of note are first off this shot with Becca and a man right here. I'm guessing this is Dr. Joe, who will arrive next week. With the women having the power after next rose ceremony, new men will be set to enter Paradise. I think the hair here matches up with Dr. Joe, who we know shows up as he's been seen in past previews, like in this shot right here. And it looks as though the person he eventually takes on his date is Natasha, seen right there. So why is Natasha crying in this shot? Is it because she's getting eliminated? Well, you might notice that while Natasha is in tears, Mari and Becca here are smiling. Meaning, as I see it, Natasha here is actually receiving a rose at the next rose ceremony, and it's one she didn't expect to get. We'll get into more details about that in the next rose ceremony ahead, so for now, let's move forward.
It feels overwhelming to see Joe kissing someone else.
I think I'm falling in love with you.
Really? I don't want to be here.
Is she leaving? Things are beginning to unravel.
So if this preview is to be believed, Kendall is having a tough time seeing Joe and Serena together and wants out of Paradise. That, however, is not gonna happen, at least not at the next rose ceremony. We can see Kendall in this post-rose ceremony shot right here, and she's standing with Ivan. There have been a few little clues thrown into the episodes last week that point to Ivan potentially connecting with Kendall, like this bit right here during Kendall's arrival.
Her body's amazing.
She looks beautiful, like she's in this amazing red dress. She's gorgeous.
We also have this moment right here from the last section of this preview showing the two of them talking. However, it's also possible that this rose is just a friendship rose and the relationship won't go further than that. But this upcoming section is the last bit of the preview, and we'll get into further details on the rose ceremony once we finish that.
Everyone told me, but I believed you.
And the preview ends with Lil Jon's arrival. Looks to be at the end of the rose ceremony. He'll be the next and apparently the final guest host for Paradise. I imagine Wells will take over after that for when things get to Decision Day and the Fantasy Suite stuff. Sort of like how he's done with the rose ceremonies. But first, let's talk about Tammy. As the last episode set up, Becca and Thomas are going to be a thing, and here in this preview shot, as well as this one, Tammy is upset. She'll be dumped by Thomas and left without a rose, and we know this happens the night of the next rose ceremony, as Jasenia and Deandra are in their rose ceremony outfits that we talked about earlier. So I wouldn't be surprised if Tammy gets eliminated, or even decides to go home before the rose ceremony. Which leads us to eliminations. And once again, we're going to run down the list of roses to be handed out and who we know is staying, to see who's left over and leaving the beach next week. Now, with only 9 men remaining at this point, there are 9 roses to be handed out, and we can strike off the obvious rose handouts, like Riley to Marissa, Joe to Serena, Noah to Abigail, and Kenny to Mari. There's also Brendan to Pieper, but we'll get into that in a second. Now, with all of this Tammy crying stuff and the date that went down last episode, we can add Thomas giving his rose to Becca to the list, leaving only Ivan, James, and Aaron as unknowns for their rose selections, and Chelsea, Natasha, Kendall, Tia, Demi, Tammy, Jasenia, and Deandra as available for roses. Now, Jasenia and Deandra we talked about earlier. I think those two are going to be headed out. But if we head back to this shot, one that we've discussed a lot this season, you'll see what appears to be everything we need to know for the last 3 roses to be handed out. Natasha is with Aaron, Tia with James, and Kendall with Ivan, which would mean Chelsea, Demi, Tammy, Deandra, and Jasenia are leaving. However, back in this post-rose ceremony shot, we can clearly see Chelsea has a rose as well, which took me back to this shot, where, during the post-show livestream I did after Tuesday's episode actually, I noticed something that I missed before. An additional hand sticking out to cheers next to Aaron's head. So, could this be Chelsea? It would make sense that Aaron, after going on the date with Chelsea, would give his rose to her and not to Natasha seemingly out of nowhere. And we can cross-reference the bracelet that she's wearing in this shot with a bracelet on this hand. I also need to remember to count the feet in these kinds of shots, because if I had done that a long while ago, I would have seen this additional foot right here. So, where originally I thought Aaron gave his rose to Natasha, I'm thinking it now goes to Chelsea, and that's her behind Aaron right here. But the question now is, where does Natasha's rose come from? Every other rose is accounted for, but yet Natasha is here and she's staying with a rose. Well, there are a few theories we can go into, and this is mostly speculation. But the first theory involves Brendan. Now, we know from the setup that they gave us last episode, with Demi saying,
Pretty bizarre that nobody is calling out Brendan, but everyone called out Chris, because Brendan's honestly being worse than Chris. He needs to give us some answers. We need to hear what's been going on.
And from the footage of fighting and Pieper crying given to us this preview, that some kind of pushback is headed Brendan and Pieper's way. And with them not being visible in this shot or this shot, I wouldn't be surprised if the two decide to leave Paradise together before the rose ceremony. Now, this first theory is that, after leaving, Brendan decides to give his rose to Natasha as an apology. Theory 2 is that Wells comes in and does that instead, saying that because Brendan and Chris left and there are so few roses to be handed out, he's decided to give out a rose to Natasha. Theory 3 is that, like with Becca arriving at the rose ceremony after Lance Bass left, a new man enters and gives his rose to Natasha. We do see a mystery figure right here in this shot with Lil Jon. This gray shirt doesn't match up with any of the identifiable men from the upcoming rose ceremony. It's not Aaron, Joe, Thomas, James, Ivan, or Noah, who can be seen in different clothes right here. It's obviously not Riley, who by the way can also be seen in a white shirt with Marissa in her rose ceremony outfit in this shot. And it's not Brendan, who's wearing this outfit the night of the rose ceremony. Now I did wonder if this could be Kenny, and that the darker coloring of the shirt he's wearing in both this shot and this shot is just due to lighting, but Kenny has very distinctive tattoos on his left arm that are not present on this man's arm in this shot. So who could this man be? Could it be Dr. Joe leading him to going on that date with Natasha the next day? I don't know, I guess we'll have to wait until next episode to know for sure. Oh, and of course there's also theory number 4, that it's just something we can't know. Something like before next rose ceremony, couples flip around in an extremely unpredictable way, or someone gets the power to hand out 2 roses or something weird. If you've got a theory, let me know in the comment section below. But before we go, there's also a couple of other things I wanted to note. One, I'm wondering if Damar is another person we're going to see in the cast next week, as we can see him in this shot right here with Ivan and Aaron fighting. There's also this shot of him with a man in the back that I can't identify. Could be someone else new arriving. I expect more than 2 men will be showing up after next rose ceremony, and this guy doesn't match any of the current guys' hair colors, except maybe Grocery Store Joe, but he doesn't have short hair like this. And the other thing I wanted to note, we have further confirmation that the woman in this shot is Mari. As something I noticed alongside many of the viewers from my live chat, is that there was a very different interview shot with Mari that they put in episode 6. During the moment she was reminiscing about her time with Kenny, right before she decided to tell him she still had feelings for him. The reason this shot seems so different is that it's actually from the end of the season, the day that Kenny proposes to Mari, as this dress matches up well with the one seen in this shot right here. So that's it for this preview breakdown for week 8. I hope you enjoyed it, and remember to give the video a like and subscribe for more content if you did. Next week, Paradise is moving to only Tuesday night, so be sure to remember that, and until then, Bachelor Fantake, out.
My Paradise experience has been based on lies.
If you're already in a relationship, that defeats the purpose of coming here.
They're the villains of their own story.
I know you guys wrote the rule book of relationships.
Stop.